For the time and technical difficulties here. First off, thank you guys for having me out. I appreciate the invite, especially to Michael, Kristen, appreciate it. As Michael said, I'm the head brewer at the Front Royal Brewing Company. We have been in operation since the first part of June in 2018, so give or take around 6 months. We have a full-fledged restaurant on site, and we have a 10-barrel brew house where we brew all our beers on site right on Main Street in Front Royal. Just a little bit of agenda highlights. Basically, we're going to go over who I am, where I came from, what Front Royal Brewery is, what do we do, how everything kind of came to be, how I got in touch with the other business owners, and how we I got to the decision to jump on the property there in Front Royal, right on Main Street, and overtaking an historical building. Ownership and head brewer kind of aspects of it, getting more into detail of the actual brewing system itself, maybe some quick highlights on the brewing process, and then jumping into the beer styles that we offer, and then kind of highlighting some special events that we have going on here in the next few months. I'm originally from the Midwest. Grew up a farm kid in the middle of cow pastures and no hills and cornfields. Grew up in a pretty rural community, and it kind of took me up into the capital of Illinois, where I was living and working with AT&T, still do to this day, and moved out here probably around eight and a half years ago. I've been on High Knob in Front Royal ever since. So, as I mentioned, I work with AT&T. I'm in supply chain logistics. Still haven't quit that day job yet. Been there for almost 17 years. As soon as I moved into this area, I got a Christmas gift, a homebrew kit from my sister and my wife, and I never really looked back as far as the passion and the awesome hobby that home brewing was. And hopefully some of you have experienced that a little bit as well. Home brewing basically kind of got me started with buckets and fermentation in my basement, brewing beer in my garage, some cases on my stovetop. It's a wonderful hobby, and it's interesting to jump into. There's a lot of science involved, and there's a lot of technique involved as well. And depending on what you're doing, and the passion that you have for it, and the time that you put in for it, depends on it will all be a result of your end product, just like many things in life. So after about 2 or 3 years of doing that on my own, I looked around and noticed there were a lot of folks in the area that home brewed, and but we didn't have any kind of community. And I founded and created the Shenandoah Valley Home Brewers Guild in the local area. We still meet to this day in Winchester, Virginia. We used to meet at the local homebrew shop, Valley Homebrew, who went out of business this summer. But they were gracious in letting us have their space after hours, and it was a group of about, at one point in time, we were about 65, 70 strong with partners and actual members as well. So we basically got together and made an educational group, and worked towards basically promoting the hobby of home brewing. We brewed together. We had fun together, and then we created it as a fundraising event character of the club as well, where twice or 3 times a year we look for opportunities to raise funds for local charities that we pick and switch up throughout the year. I'm still a member of the Home Brew Club. I passed on the president reins about a year ago, around this time a year ago. Thankfully, because I wouldn't have had time to do all the things I'm doing with the brewery and the home brew club as well. So basically during that journey, that head brewer journey, I got a couple certifications along the way. The beer judging certification is hugely important to be able to pick out flaws in beer, to pick out what those flaws were caused by, all that fun stuff, and then be able to actually talk about it and give appropriate feedback to the brewers that submit beer. More importantly, pick out the flaws in my own beer and be able to correct those and know what flaws came from what error in the process, or what were having mistakes that I want to duplicate again. The other aspect is much like the wine certifications. The Cicerone is a beer certification based on serving and serving the most highest quality of beer to the customer. My feeling is brewing is art. It's my passion. It makes me happy to see other people happy that taking part and enjoying something that you've created. And I've never, for the life of me, I never could have imagined I walk into an establishment that's not only my establishment, but my brewery, and just on the other side of those doors, I made that beer, and people are sitting at tables and enjoying a fine meal and enjoying my beer. Pretty amazing. So as I said, we're a 10-barrel brew house. That's basically equivalent to about 310 barrels, or 310 gallons at a time is 10 barrels. A barrel of beer is roughly around 31 gallons. We're right on Main Street, 122 East Main Street. We have a full-fledged restaurant. We have a full bar, local wines. We can make cocktails, basic cocktails. Live music's set up for Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays. We have trivia on Mondays, Taco Tuesdays all day on Tuesdays. Our website is pretty simple, frontrowbrewing.com, with all the latest and greatest updated information. We try to keep up and not so well sometimes on our menu, because it changes pretty drastically based on what we can get seasonally and fresh. We try to avoid as much as possible pulling something out of the freezer and just fixing it. We want as much handmade craft in the kitchen as possible, just like our beer. How we came to be. It says 3 years here, but I mean it's really been in conversation, rough conversation around 5 years. Jerry Welcome and his son approached me when they had found out that I was president of the local home brew club, and they had this wild idea that they wanted to start a brewery somewhere. And it took a little bit for me to understand how serious they were. And on that path of the next few years, we accumulated some fellow owners that were interested but had other skills that would be able to provide to the business. A restaurant, a manager, folks that had run a kitchen before, folks that actually ran a business before, folks that had accounting experience, folks that had engineering experience. Because in the brewery, you're going to have to know how to build and fix a lot of things in the spectrum of engineering. So we looked in several different areas. We first kind of looked in Fauquier County. We looked in Marshall. Things just didn't really work out. And then we realized, there was a bunch of buildings that needed to be used right here in Warren County. So we started to really look hard in Warren County, and we first looked at the old police station. We actually put in an investigative kind of bid on that and tried to see if it would work. And it was just so much, we were just going to have to chop up so much of the walls that it just didn't make much sense to actually get in there and renovate it. But our fellow business partners got together on the side and actually bought that building and are looking to renovate it. The Barnharts at that point in time, once they figured out that we had moved on from the police station, we pretty much were just resolved to, okay, we'll just keep our eyes out and this project's going to be put on hold for a bit. But it wasn't 2 weeks after that that the Barnharts reached out to us, letting us know that they were actively looking for tenants. And tenants just like us that wanted to start a brewery, wanted to start a brew pub kind of mentality. So they showed us the old Lucky Star building and the building that we're now in. Current state was I believe it was an auction house and storage at that point. The building, and I'll get into the building a little bit more in detail. The building was just nothing but a big concrete shell. And it was built in the 19-teens, and we saw a lot of historic relevance in there that was just covered up. And that's what was so appealing to us whenever we initially toured that building. So the project, after we saw the building and agreed to do it, the Barnharts showed interest in actually being owners as well as the owners of the building and landlords, which had its own set of perks. It could help us along the way of getting things ready and not having, maybe possibly deferring the rent down the road because it was their building and they wanted it obviously to be set up to have good tenants for us and for forever. So the renovation, it was long and drawn out. It took us about over a year. If you guys followed the progress of that. Basically, they gutted the entire building, and it was, like I said, it was a concrete shell built in the 1920s. So all the HVAC, all the electric, everything had to be put in from scratch, and it was a test of wills for sure. It's still 2 months out. I was still like, probably not going to happen anytime soon, or probably not going to happen because we went through all that, and it tests your faith and it tests your will for sure. So we move on to how we connected with the owners of the property, Tim and Carrie Barnhart. You guys have obviously met those folks. While they were showing us the business, or the building, they obviously had a business on the side called Vi Properties. And Vi Properties' sole existence is to purchase buildings that are available in the Front Royal area and try to renovate them for tenants for reuse, much like what we see now. And again, like I did say, they showed interest in being owners, and they now are owners of Front Royal Brewing Company as well. And I will say, without their involvement, I wouldn't be here today for sure, because there was a lot of things that helped us along the way with that landlord-tenant relationship, and they're also being owners that helped us survive, and will help us survive through a little bit of our first winter. The building itself, it's really cool. It's a very historic building. I love every day going in there and seeing the framing that they did with the concrete back in the 19-teens. You can see the wood grain in the roof and the ceiling of it. You can see 1917 and 1919 plates, license plates on the ceiling that are framed. And we kind of painted them to highlight those. We have pictures of Model T cars in between the posts that still stand today, which is really neat, and really think about how that building's been used over the years and how much, you think if these walls could talk, what you would hear. After the building was was an indoor parking garage, probably first in the area over the years, and then it turned into a gas station as well, right off of Main Street, and then somewhere along the line it turned into the local pool hall, and then it turned into the state that it was in, which was the auction house. So, like I said, you pay attention to some of the nuances when you walk in there. It's really cool to think about that building actually getting built with all concrete framing in the 19-teens, 1920s. As part owner and also head brewer, basically what I brought to the table was exactly what I talked about is my brewing experience, my intellectual property of the recipes that I created over the years. All these beers that you see on tap today, I brewed hundreds and hundreds of times and tried to perfect them to the state that they're in now. Basically, I wear a lot of hats. I don't not only manage the brew house and manage the brewing of the beer, but I help out on the business side as well. With some business leadership and assisting in making some key decisions. But I'm not there day to day running the operation. I am there day to day running the brew house on the back end. So as Michael had mentioned, my wife works with me, and I am very thankful of that. Some days it doesn't work out so well, but most days it does. So without her, she's our QA, QC tech. She has a background in that, so she kind of schedules my life, and thankfully she does, because some days I wake up and I don't know what day it is and where I'm going and what I'm doing, but she certainly has me straight. But she handles all the safety and quality and scheduling and inventory, and it's just a lot of it that she handles for the company and for me, that I wouldn't be able to function without those pieces being taken care of by somebody that I trust. So we jump into exactly what we have in the brew house, and if any of you show up and want to have an in-depth detailed tour, I'd be happy to walk you through it, as long as we're not having some kind of cleanup issue, or we're not in the middle of actually brewing. In the actual main brew house, we have, again, a 10-barrel brew house, and that consists of a 10-barrel, or actually a 20-barrel hot water tank, basically, that we use for brewing and cleaning. These are all steam jacketed to heat up the water. We have a boil kettle and we have a mash tun. We'll go through all those details in the next slide. Excuse me. We have a 10 10-barrel fermenters that we use to ferment the beer. So at all times, pretty much they're all full. That's what we're using to actually make the sugar water that is wort into beer by adding the yeast. So the yeast actually turn the sugar water that we steep the grains in to actually beer, to alcohol. So the yeast turn that sugar solution, and they eat the sugars and the starches, and they produce CO2 and alcohol whenever they start to eat through it. We have one bright tank that basically adds the carbonation to the beer, and then we have 6 serving tanks that basically connected to our tap wall. Nothing more than big kegs of carbonated beer that's ready to go. We also have a mill. We grind our own. Excuse me. Thank you. We grind our own grains, and we have a CIP cart that's all for cleaning after we've moved the beer out. And then downstairs we actually have a glorified homebrew system, which is something that I could never afford at home. but it's really amazing. I got a 1-barrel pilot system in the basement downstairs, so it still allows me to play around and do experimental things with some, either new hops that come out or styles that I haven't even tried yet. And we call those beers that come out of there our Trail Series beers. So they're really small batch. 1 barrel, so it means there's less than 250 pints to be had. And we try to put those out at least twice a month. So they're really interesting things that could and have already shown some fruit to go up on the big system and become one of our seasonals someday. So the brewing process, kind of high level here. I'm not going to get too technical. I did mention the basic keys to a brew house are the hot water tank, the mash tun, and the boil kettle. That's what we're using to make beer on brew day. So we're taking the hot water from the hot water tank, we're moving it into the mash tun, we're adding the grains in after they're milled, we're steeping those grains like think of the mash tun as like a big giant T-ball with a false bottom in the bottom of it. We let that steep for around an hour or so, depending on the beer style. We strip that steep water out of that mash tun because we have a false bottom in there with a screen. We leave the spent grains behind. We move the water into the kettle. We heat up that water. We boil that water for somewhere around an hour. We're adding hops in different intervals, adding flavors, spices, depending on the type of beer. Then we're moving it on, rapidly chilling it and moving it on into the fermenter. That's when we add the yeast. Potentially after fermentation, we add more hops, depending on the beer style. Then we move it into the bright tank where it adds carbonation. Then we package it, either in kegs or in the serving tanks. All in all, that process on an average beer probably takes around about a month to a month and a half, depending on the beer style. We get all our grain from Country Malt Group out of North Carolina, or BSG, and they have several spots on the East Coast. But predominantly our grain is coming from Wisconsin or Germany. I do a lot of German brewing, a lot of German beers, so the authentic German grain is very important to me to get. So some of our beers and the beer styles that we have, and we do have a sample of our cans and labels. They're not full, by the way, Mike. So, but the other thing I will mention is all our artwork has been done by Art in the Valley, which is another Barnhart property across the street on Main Street. Those fine folks have done all our artwork, and they're very great artists, and they have been for us for sure. They did all our logos and all our artwork. So year round, we have the Siren of the Shenandoah, Hefeweizen. We have the Linden Lager, Vienna Lager. We have the Canoe Capital American IPA. We have the Tenfold Double IPA. The Hopstrasse, Kottbusser. Hopstrasse is German for Main Street. We have the Boyd's Garage Milk Stout, which the original building's name was Boyd's Garage. Night of the Valley American Porter. And then we do seasonals throughout the year, as I mentioned, the small batch Trail Series batches, at least twice a month, give or take. And then seasonal beers. This is our plan for seasonal beers as we rotate through the seasons. We'll have in the spring have an American Wheat, a Czech Pilsner, a Belgian Blonde. In the summer, Rye IPA, Orange Ginger Saison. And then in the fall, these beers are actually on now. The Schwartz beer, the Line of Winter Schwartz beer, Dismal Hollow Dunkel, and then next year we'll put in an Oktoberfest or a traditional German Marzen. Winter we're going to do a German IPA with all German hops, very unique. And then we're going to do a variant of the Night of the Valley, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then here pretty soon we'll do our Irish Stout and our Irish Dry Stout and a brown. So this next slide is talking about the Night of the Valley variant. So on December 15th, we're going to do our first bomber release. I say bomber release, it's a 22-ounce big bottle. And we did it on the small batch system, so there's going to be less than 130 bombers available. We're going to package it up in a nice little box with some, if you so choose to get the glassware with it, it'll be a nice little Christmas gift or nice little gift to bring to holiday parties. So we've taken our American Porter and we've upped the alcohol a couple notches to 10%, and we've added bourbon Madagascar vanilla beans to it to give it a twist. In hopes to have a yearly event called the Day of the Night in Front Royal. So the pricing on that, the individual bottle without the snifters are around $18. You can get 2 snifters with that bottle for $28. And again, they're all in nice little packaging, not much wrapping to be needed with it. So that's on the 15th. Hope to see you all there. I expect to sell out possibly by midday, if not sooner. Do want to mention, I know we missed an opportunity for being the venue for your Pints for Polio event, and I'd love to have conversations with you now that we have a little bit more of our stuff straight. As you know, the first 6 months in opening a business is a little bit chaotic, and it still is. But I do recognize and affirm that we did miss out on an opportunity, and I'd love to be able to talk to you all in the future about that or anything else that you have going on. The next few slides are just our calendar. The other aspect of our business too is we do live music on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Try to get local bands and some bands that are traveling through that are starting to get some notoriety. We like to have a lot of bluegrass. We like to have a lot of folk bands in there. We like to have some blues and rock on the side as well. So I will say that the very last week here of December looks to be pretty amazing. All the way from the 20th on down, those bands have been some of our most popular bands that we've had. But if you're looking for something to do Thursday through Saturday and you don't want to go out too far, we're right there on Main Street. We have a pretty good space for live music. And we run specials, we run beer specials, we run food specials during all those times as well. And then the next slide is what we have on tap for entertainment in January. So we're pretty much fully booked for the next 3 to 4 months. So we try to stay on top of that, and we're starting to get a little bit of a name to these bands to want to actually come and play. So we're hopefully drawing bands that we haven't seen in this area or wouldn't see in this area if not for working on it and maintaining a notoriety in that piece of the business. All right, and that's it. Unless you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Sir?